Welcome to No Judgment Zone. I am your host, Ursula Payne. Today we will be discussing intersectionality and allies, as well as how you can be an ally. Before we begin, let's define intersectionality. In its simplest form, intersectionality describes different ways in which we identify within our society, such as our race, class, gender, and how these characteristics overlap in relation to discrimination and privilege. For example, a black disabled woman in the LGBTQIA community will have different experiences than a white able-bodied cisgendered male. To create an inclusive environment, these different perspectives need to be considered when attempting to expand equality across our campus. To learn the student body's overall understanding of intersectionality, let's toss it to Josh VanDemark to hear more from the students on the spot.
Hello, and welcome back to On the Spot with Joshua VanDemark. My name is Joshua VanDemark, and today we'll be asking the student body of Slippery Rock University about intersectionality and being an ally. The first question we'll be asking the students is, do they know what intersectionality means?
So intersectionality is the intersection of different identities and how those interact with each other. So, for example, someone who is a person of color but also queer, and how those both two identities intersect and how that impacts them in the way they're seen and treated in the world.
People of minority groups who may, also be part of other minority groups, helping each other out, we're all in the same world, we're all just trying to get by, so gotta help out your other homies in the.
The second question we'll be asking the students is, what does intersectionality mean to them?
I have friends and stuff, and I can see the way their different identities and their personalities, like how that impacts them.
I think it's really important. I myself am a part of, the LGBT community, so it's important to me that, I help out people that are also disenfranchised and stuff, like race, gender, disability, all of that. Like, we're all kind of, in the same society, and we're all just trying to help each other out. So it's kind of meaningful like that.
The third question we'll be asking the students today is, how do they feel intersectionality is addressed at Slippery Rock University?
I think we do have a lot of different clubs that represent like different categories and groups of people at Slippery Rock, which I think is definitely a good way to make people feel accepted and sort of find people who have like similar experiences and interests to them.
Yeah, I was gonna say a similar thing, and then there's also just like activities that represent everybody, and you can join them if you want and feel more comfortable.
So to me, intersectionality, the fact that I can recognize other people's struggles and identities, and the way that, who they are and how that has impacted the way they're treated.
Well, I know that President Barry has done talks, about difficult topics dealing with racism, and we have the LGBTQ place for people to go to talk about their feelings, and at least I think the theater program tries to do shows that are inclusive for everyone, being gender neutral and going against the grain of society.
The fourth question we'll be asking the students today is, in what ways do they see intersectionality among the student body at Slippery Rock University?
I mean, I guess like everybody, like our staff is diverse. I guess it's not all like one way or the other. So I mean, that's kind of it.
Yeah. And going off of what Rachel said, I think like the student body is also pretty diverse. Like we have people from all different places and yeah, just a wide variety.
Across the board, all students are really welcoming and open to other people. Like, I think I see very diverse friend groups pretty often. It's like that.
Well, I know there are a lot of on-campus organizations I know there's a Black Action Society. I'm part of Rock Out, which is the LGBT organization on campus. And sometimes, we get together and we plan different events. And I mean, I think the university just tried to provide that space for students to feel comfortable.
For our fifth question, we're asking students how intersectionality can be more represented at Slippery Rock University.
More, events or programs that, really go for, all races, all gender. Just, support them and, get to know them as, people and not, make those quick, judgments, stereotypical judgments that, aren't true for a lot of the time.
Yeah, and maybe more like, for lack of a better word, like advertising of the different like groups and organizations that we have on campus, because I think like for me personally, I don't know about probably the majority of the different groups that we do have. So I think if we like put more stuff out there about them, people would be more likely to join them.
There is a lot of representation for those people through organizations and stuff. And like I know they just hired like a new diversity, equity, and inclusion director or something along those lines. So yeah.
And for our final question, we're asking, how can the community at Slippery Rock University be better advocates for intersectionality?
I don't know, just better listeners, I guess. Like, go out of your way, talk to people that are having these issues and stuff, and just being like, hey,
I mean, like I said before, just get to know people, become friends with, them, and say hi, don't be afraid to talk and, invite them to things, and just show your support and get to know them and have fun and just.
We can do a similar thing, like actually, like if you're a part of a club or something, you can put that out there rather than just the people who are in charge of the club or the activity.
Thank you for joining On the Spot with Josh. My name is Joshua VanDemark. Stay tuned after the commercial break for a continued discussion about intersectionality and being an ally.
Do you remember when you were told to sit still? Walk, don't run. Don't sit too close to the screen. Don't touch that. Color inside the lines. At Slippery Rock, we inspire the motion, the music, and the moments of challenge that allow you to be your best, now and in the future. Slippery Rock University. Experience the difference. Do you remember when you were told not to play with fire? Do you remember when you were told to put away your toys? When they said caring wasn't in your generation's DNA? When they said stop playing with toys? Do you remember when they said stop dreaming? At Slippery Rock, we inspire the dreams, the noise, the caring to challenge you to be your best, now and in the future. Slippery Rock University. Experience the difference.
Welcome back. My name is Amanda Riley. My pronouns are she, her, and this is A Seat at the Table, where we will get to hear the voices and opinions from 3 highly involved students here at SRU. Today we will be covering the topic at hand, intersectionality and allies. To start off, could everyone please state their names, pronouns, and class rank?
I'm Frankie Walker. I'm a super senior here at Slippery Rock, and my pronouns are he, him.
I'm Shy Malcolm. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm in my 2nd year of graduate school.
I'm Katie Shope. My pronouns are she, they, and I'm a sophomore.
So intersectionality is the acknowledgement that everyone has their own unique experiences of life, discrimination, and oppression. How do you see intersectionality in your everyday lives at Slippery Rock University?
A lot of the students that I know here at Slippery Rock usually have identities that intersect with their other identities. For example, a student that is a member of Rock Out that identifies with the LGBT community may also be a member of SOUL, which is the student organization for Latinos, Hispanics, and their allies.
And going off Rock Out, I think another good example of this is the Drag Brunch Bingo event that we hosted with Hope, Rock Athletics, SAPA, and Rock the Weekend. This showed like a bunch of different kinds of people of different backgrounds and interests coming together to hold an event that's like a positive experience for students, but also educational.
To speak to the university events, I know during Women's History Month they were holding events that were specifically for women, but also for women of color to talk about their intersectionality, so I thought that was really cool. So do you think social context influences our perceptions of race, class, and gender?
Absolutely. The biggest thing that comes to mind for me is like social movements we see a lot on like the internet and social media, such as Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movement, because we see like our favorite celebrities or influencers like saying they support this cause, which lets other people know they supported. People who support them are more inclined to look into it and also support that. But if we just know what our family and friends tell us and just believe that that is the truth, that opinion, then that's a very narrow, closed-minded perception.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Katie. And I think, you know, not only does social context influence, but sometimes it just determines our identities in relation to race and gender and class. I think that the social context that we find ourselves in can influence behavior, which just influences like expression and what we identify as and how we identify. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both Katie and Cheyenne. Social context definitely includes the environment in which you grow and develop. And a lot of our early development is where a person finds these early perceptions of race, class, and gender based off the culture's pre-existing perception. So yeah, I definitely think that social context has a big influence on that.
Yeah. And how you talked about upbringing, like I know for me in my community, I had this idea of race, class, and gender, and I think I can speak for a lot of students that coming to university like completely popped that bubble for me. So that's something that influenced my like social context of those things. So what are some examples of ways to be an advocate for people who experience discrimination because of their overlapping identities?
I think one of the most important yet easiest ways to be an advocate for people with different identities is just to, especially on a college campus, just to show up to a different groups or identities events. Doing that shows your support or solidarity for that group or identity, and you know, it also, you're adding your voice to however many voices are identifying with that identity. So I feel that is one of the easiest and most important ways to do so.
Yeah, Frankie, I love that you said that, because I think if you attend events that are kind of geared towards certain identities and marginalized communities, even if you don't belong to that community, you certainly can learn about their experiences and like discrimination that they face. And then in the future, you can act as an ally or an advocate for them. I think that's something that's important, is just to recognize that people who belong to marginalized communities and have like intersectional identities, sometimes self-advocacy can be emotional labor. It can be really difficult to do. It can be embarrassing, or it can just feel like a lot. It's really exhausting. And so I think if you're not a part of a community, it's kind of your responsibility as an ally to do some self-advocacy. If you see something that is, you know, inappropriate, maybe something that's anti-Black, you know, don't put the pressure or expect the Black people in the room or in the situation to address it. But if you're non-Black, that's a great opportunity for you to alleviate some labor from Black people and just kind of advocate for them in that moment.
Yeah, I agree with both of you 100%. I think it's really important to listen to people who experience these things, to educate yourself on the things they experience as well and who they are, and to be open-minded to just change and grow and maybe form a new opinion or view, and use your privilege to speak up for others who may not be able to or feel comfortable, and show that you support them.
I like what you said. Like, I feel like we should normalize being presented new information and then changing our opinion and like evolving as people.
Absolutely. Conversation's the biggest way to educate yourself, and getting involved in those hard conversations is the best way to learn something new and take that and share it with other people. Yeah. But seeing something and saying something is a huge part of advocating. So to wrap things up, what ways do you think SRU can do to help with any issues that come with intersectionality, such as privilege and discrimination?
In the past, we've seen the university president, condemn discrimination, and I believe that Slippery Rock should continue to do this, but I don't think that there should only be this reaction whenever these principles are attacked or threatened. I feel that emphasizing the importance of inclusion and diversity all the time would create a much more accepting campus environment.
I love that, and I think in the same sense, diversity and inclusion, it doesn't begin and end in the Office of Inclusive Excellence. It's a great place to start or look to for as a resource. But I think that the university would really benefit from addressing issues of discrimination and kind of like prioritizing intersectionality in all aspects of the college experience. So in the classroom, in the residence halls, just everywhere that intersectional students or students who have intersectional identities and marginalized identities, wherever they're going to be, we should definitely be advocating for them in those areas.
Yeah, I definitely agree with both of you again. And going off what Frankie said about not just speaking up about our differences when something like goes wrong, maybe holding like a mandatory presentation for all students to attend to show them what intersectionality can look like, how to recognize your own privilege and what you can do to support others and speak up. And if a case of discrimination does happen, call that student or person out, give them consequences and educate them on how to be different, because if we never call these people out, they're just going to continue to do it if there's no consequences.
I like that proactive approach rather than reactive. I mean, sometimes reacting is necessary, but we could maybe prevent harm to marginalized communities by being proactive. So I love that idea.
I think going off of campus too and just going into government programs that are offered, for example with DACA or DACA students, a couple years ago I got to sit in on this presentation at a conference I went to, and that's all they talked about there. And I was almost on the verge of tears hearing what some of those students have to go through. And knowing that a lot of the schools in the South are the only ones that help those students, I feel like some schools up north could do better too. But that's all the time that we have for today. So thank you all for joining us and taking a seat at the table. Stay tuned after the commercial break for One-on-One, where we will hear an expert's opinion on the topic at hand.
Do you remember when you were told not to play with fire? You were told to be quiet. When they said caring wasn't in your generation's DNA. When they said stop playing with toys. Do you remember when they said stop dreaming? At Slippery Rock, we inspire the dreams, the noise, the caring to challenge you to be your best. Now and in the future, Slippery Rock University. Experience the difference. Do you remember when you were told to sit still? Walk, don't run. Don't sit too close to the screen. Don't touch that. Color inside the lines. At Slippery Rock, we inspire the motion, the music, and the moments of challenge that allow you to be your best, now and in the future. Slippery Rock University. Experience the difference. Do you remember when you were told not to play with fire? You were told to be quiet. When they said caring wasn't in your generation's DNA. When they said stop playing with toys. Do you remember when they said stop dreaming? At Slippery Rock, we inspire the dreams, the noise, the caring to challenge you to be your best, now and in the future. Slippery Rock University. Experience the difference.
Hello SRU and welcome to One-on-One. Today we have Keshia Booker with us. Keshia has earned her Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from Teal College and her Master of Arts in clinical mental health counseling from Slippery Rock University. Currently, she is serving as the Assistant Director of Multicultural Development within the Office of Inclusive Excellence. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us, Keshia.
No problem.
So let's jump right into it. How would you define intersectionality?
Intersectionality to me is the lens of which I try to do most of our diversity and inclusion and belonging work. I think most people recognize their social identity groups. So they recognize their race, their gender, sexual orientation, their religious identities, but they don't talk about the ways of which those maneuver with each other or how one is dependent on the other in most of their social interactions. So I try to make sure that when doing programming or when talking about diversity and inclusion and belonging, that they recognize that one aspect of your identity does not make up your entire identity. And sometimes the ways of which your identities co-interact can really change the way you view a situation or the way you handle a situation. And so that's the way I try to define and work within the realm of intersectionality.
Yeah, so if somebody were to ask you a question like that, how would you explain it to them?
Ask me a question like what?
Like how two different parts of their identity clash and they only really identify with one.
So people often say, like, how do you identify yourself? And I often will say that I am an African American woman and I'm not going to separate those two aspects of my identity. And so that's the best example that I tend to give people, and that the way that I frame my world is always going to be from the lens of a Black woman, because I'm never going to be able to take one away from the other. Some of my experiences may be predominantly because I'm a woman, but the way I react in those experiences may be because I'm Black or maybe because I'm Christian. And you just need to know that if we're dealing with a holistic person, that holistic person comes with identities that make sense and know how to work within each other, and sometimes it comes with identities that conflict within each other.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. How can we teach people about intersectionality if they don't show any interest or if they don't think they care?
Sometimes I think we should find ways of which it matters to them. So a way that I tend to talk about intersectionality to try to get people to care is around money. So that we all know that there's a giant pay gap, and we think that it's just because men make more money than women. But if you really start to look into it, if you are a person of color, if you identify as a woman of color, you are going to make less money than both a white male and a white woman. And so sometimes finding ways of which we all generally have an interest is a good way to teach intersectionality. So I try to work within the pay gap when speaking to people who are like, this doesn't apply to me. Well, it can, and in a lot of ways it should. And so even if you don't identify as a woman of color, if you are a privileged white man, in a sense, you have a mother that will make less, or you'll have a sister or a friend. And so there are ways to make people care. We just need to find something they're invested in.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense, because who isn't concerned about money all the time?
Right, everyone's chasing a bag.
Exactly. What qualities would a good ally have?
I think that a good ally needs to recognize their own privilege. A lot of ways our allies are people who've done their own work, and so they recognize the way they interact with the world and the way the world interacts with them. And so that would be my number one quality, I think, is doing your own work and doing it before you come to the situation to advocate. I also think that our allies need to take some time, and sometimes allyship is saying no to an opportunity so that a person that has less privilege in you less privilege than you within that space has the opportunity to shine. So sometimes it's like, I'm saying no to this job opportunity because this other person I recognize was more qualified, has this, or whatever the situation may be. Allyship comes in so many different forms. I think that that's a little known one, is like, not every opportunity is made for you. Don't take it from someone else. If you have the privilege and the power to give opportunities, then do so.
Right, that definitely makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
How would you try, if somebody was very single-minded, how would you try to explain to them it's okay to be an ally? Like, you can support all these other groups without...
I would say allyship doesn't always have to be loud, is the other thing. I think most people think that our allies are number one protesters, and what you see is the outspoken person. Sometimes it's saying in a meeting, I heard Keshia say that. Can we give her a second to finish her thought? Or repeating something that someone else said and then giving them credit for saying it. I think sometimes we recognize that allyship, we only see the allyship that's loud, but there are little ways of which you can really advocate for people and their experiences.
Right, no, that definitely makes sense. Do you think anybody can be an ally?
Everyone can and should be an ally. I think that there are causes that we are all passionate about, and so you should be able to advocate for those that are less privileged than you or have abilities to shine. I think we all need to take a second and recognize what we're passionate about and create avenues for those passions to be at the forefront. And so everyone can and should ally or be an ally at different points in their lives.
No, I definitely agree. Well, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it so much. We're so lucky to have you here to answer these important questions. Stay tuned after the break to hear more about your next week's episode.
Do you remember when you were told not to play with fire? You were told to be quiet. When they said caring wasn't in your generation's DNA. When they said stop playing with toys. Do you remember when they said stop dreaming? At Slippery Rock, we inspire the dreams, the noise, the caring to challenge you to be your best. Now and in the future, Slippery Rock University. Experience the difference. Do you remember when you were told to put away your toys? Don't climb on that. Don't write on the walls. Go easy on the makeup. Do you remember when you were told to mind your own business and wait your turn? At Slippery Rock, we inspire the heights, the color, the caring for each other to challenge you to be your best. Now and in the future, Slippery Rock University. Experience the difference.
There you have it, Slippery Rock. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of No Judgment Zone. Please make sure to tune in again next Tuesday, April 12th at 5:30 on WSRU-TV's YouTube for another episode, where we'll be discussing discrimination, microaggressions, and more. Take care.